Okay, the stream is starting, and I'm going to go and make sure our backup is going.
Yeah, I think if you flip so you can see it on the screen. Or whatever you want to demo on the back side. Why? I think it's the same chip. It's just they use both sides. Oh, I know that. He's talking about.
No, I think that's why. I didn't play it. Yeah.
All right. We're actually live. This is weird.
I know, right?
All right. I'll call the meeting to order. First up is the Pledge of Allegiance. We can do it all together live.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to actually see people live. We're getting closer. Not too close. All right. Thank you all for coming. So I guess we'll start right in because I assume we've got fair amount to cover tonight. First up is approval of the minutes of April 26, 2021.
So moved.
We have a motion from Jay. Do we have a second? We have a second from Earl. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of April 26, 2021? Okay, do we have Jeff remotely or is he not here? Jason, can you tell if Jeff Rebell is remote? Not hearing anything?
I can.
He's not? Okay.
Not seeing the attendees list now.
Okay. All right. Michelle, if you're following there, if you can just let us know if he does come online, that would be great. Just in case he joins us late. All right. Next up, so that was a unanimous approval, I guess, on that. So we have 5 of us, so we do have a quorum. Next up is approving roll of the accounts dated April 29th, 2021 in the amount of $263,019.72 and dated April 29th, 2021 in the amount of $19,299.48 and dated May 13th, 2021 in the amount of $259,266.35. Do I have a motion to approve those rolls?
Move to approve the rules as listed.
Okay, a motion from John. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, he has a second. All right, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the rolls? It is unanimous. All right, report of committees. Do we have any committee reports at this time? No. Okay. Very good. Now there's an MMTC governance meeting coming up and such, but that's later in the week. Public comment. So we've often moved this to the end of the agenda, but since we're live, we could entertain this now. So we do have a remote room for anybody who wanted to come to this meeting remotely. If people are logging on remotely, there's a phone number online. Now is the time to call that number. And it will ring right here. But we'll give that a minute. Jason was going to let us know if somebody showed up in the remote room that was watching there. But as of now, I'd say we probably don't have that. So, not hearing the phone ringing, I guess we'll keep going.
Joel,
Yes, sir.
I have maybe a suggestion just to again ask for it towards the end of the meeting, just because that's been our practice for approximately the last year.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, we're doing it now, but just to ensure anybody that logs in later.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, if that's the consensus, we can surely bring that topic back up at the end of the agenda. Okay, all right. So if you got a public comment, we're doing it again at the end, so if you're tuned in online.
Thank you.
Thank you. Administrators report. We have live administrators. Oh, we'll start with Jason over here, right?
All right, just a couple of quick hitters. We'll be sharing some return to school protocols shortly. First of all, welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Just an update, we've had a couple of COVID cases over the last few weeks. We returned back to full capacity tomorrow. We've had some 8th graders return today, so hopefully 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will be full capacity tomorrow. We begin our NWEA testing on Monday the 24th. The testing will pretty much go the rest of the year due to the cohorts, due to the 3-day science test, and due to the nature of makeup exams, students being absent and such. But that begins Monday. Thank you, Michelle, for coordinating the district. We've had several meetings so we can discuss the logistics with Kyle, our school counselor, with the high school as well. So I just want to thank you, Michelle, for that. Over the next few weeks, we will conclude the school year with our award ceremony. So we feel it's important to recognize our students. We give an 8th grade award, which is the Whitaker Award. Recognize students in all content areas, music, the arts, etc. So we're doing some planning, and it's right around the corner, believe it or not. So just want to say that. And then another thanks to Michelle, working on a universal screening tool, K through 12 for math. We've had numerous meetings. I don't want to ruin your thunder. You're probably going to share some of that, but it's excellent, fantastic. We've seen a number of presentations to see what is the best resource for both high school, middle school, and elementary school, and helping drive some instructional practice for our math students. So, Michelle, you've done a lot of work with that. I just want to publicly thank you for that as well. So, that's all I have for a report today. Unless you have questions.
Questions?
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Bell? Jeff is on? Okay. All right. That's good to know. Thank you.
A couple of quick hitters. Like Jason, we are also in the midst of starting to get out the science test and NWEA information. We are doing science testing this week, NWEA and next week. I also want to thank Michelle she's been great at getting the information from the state, and without belaboring it, it's been kind of a slow process getting information to then get it out to the proctors to train them to do all this. So Michelle's been fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Plans for graduation went out last week or the week before. There was a couple of things that I wanted feedback from parents on. And the first thing was, because we're going to be doing graduation on the football field, you've got that weather thing. So if it rains, what do you do? And so I really wanted the parent input and the students' input on, do we put it in the gym and offer 4 tickets per graduate to come to graduation? Or do we postpone it to the Friday and then get as many people there as possible? And overwhelmingly, it was about like 75% of the respondents said, let's just do a rain day. It was more important to be able to, I think for them, to be able to get as many people there as possible. And we're gonna have cohorts set up on the field. We're renting chairs from Are You Ready to Party? We're gonna set up pods of 4. That way families can go and not have to worry about being really close to another family. Masks are going to be mandated, and just to make it as safe as possible so nobody is uncomfortable. So the graduates are gonna leave here just like they would at Colby and march in. Marching may look a little bit different. It's gonna be, single file coming in, but trying to recreate exactly what graduation would have been, kind of like we did last year when we tried to create using cars and being able to, having to stay in cars, but trying to create that same flow of marching in and to try to create something special. So graduation is planned for June 9th. Let's pray that we have weather like this and we can get through it, because if it rains, it's not going to be the best. But we're going to do what we can do to all be together and celebrate the class of 2021. Class night is going to be in person on June 7th. That's the Monday night. We're going to give each graduate 4 tickets, and we're going to set up the gym. This is going to be the first time all year that we've had guests into our school. But it's a smaller class, limiting to 4 tickets apiece. We can keep families socially distanced apart. Again, everybody wearing masks, that we can create a special event for the class of 2021 that, there's not one person in this room that doesn't feel bad for those kids on missing out on so much this year. And we are going to do the class parade again that we had started last year. That was a huge hit. We were originally going to do it on June 6th. There was good feedback from a lot of the community members that there was going to be some potential state championships, especially with track. So I went back, worked with Officer Stewart, who then talked to the 2 chiefs about finding a time on Sunday. And before I just moved it, I didn't want to interfere with families' plans that's a day for families. And overwhelmingly, it was almost 100% of the families that said, no, we would rather do it on Sunday. So we're going to do it at 1 o'clock. We try to go, if people go to services, get it enough later on in the afternoon where we stay away from any services that might be going on. And also try to stay away from the Sunday morning traffic of people getting to their services and wherever they may be going. So we're going to do it at 1 o'clock. We're going to leave from the high school, and then we're going to follow the same route that we did last year. Leave from here, hit McNabb, go down Roderick to Frankwood up Smiley to Outer Clinton Ave, and then get back to the high school. And last but not least, our April Student of the Month is senior Kaylee Nevin. Kaylee is a fantastic leader within our school. She has been the student stage manager for all 3 productions in drama this year. Not only does she do that, but she takes it upon herself to mentor a lot of the younger kids. Her artwork is in a lot of teachers' classrooms, and one person I'm thinking about is Mr. Thurston, who's on. She did this great painting last year of Joshua Chamberlain, and has a nice quote underneath there. And that's just the type of student leader that Kaylee is. And she's an advocate for all students. And she was a fantastic choice for Student of the Month this month. That is it. I will save the rest for what I have to talk about later on.
Only suggestion I'd make on the parade is that can slow it down just a hint, because it went by pretty quick. But about the time you figured out who was in the vehicle, it was gone. Even when you know the people. So
I will talk to the lead officer on that. Absolutely.
that would be great.
Okay.
Awesome, great. Any questions?
Anything else?
All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you, sir.
I'm going to increase our volume a little. Sorry.
All right,
Now that Jeff is with us, I want you to be able to hear him.
all right, that's good.
Jeff?
Yep, I got you. Can you hear me?
Perfect, thank you, sir.
Yep, got you.
All right, thanks for joining us, Jeff. Okay, why don't we go with Erica back there? With all our principals.
So I will try to be brief. So as Jason mentioned, he's been a little occupied with COVID, as have we at the elementary school today. Spent some time with my friend COVID. Not me personally, but contact tracing. So that continues to be something that impacts us frequently. I just wanted to say thank you to Kyle. He's done a tremendous amount of work on getting our new assessments, NUIA, and the science test up and running. It's been no small feat to kind of learn about that. He has done NUI in the past, but not necessarily everybody in our building has. So he's been working on schedules and making sure the information that needs to be relayed is there, as well as with our new science assessment that nobody has a great deal of information about. So he has been vital to making sure that we can move forward with that. Also, he's been pretty busy with sub plans each day. Because of the need to have subs for some of our assessments, like DRAs, lately it's been hard to have everybody covered, and each morning he works to be creative and make sure that all of our the places that need to be covered are being covered. So I just wanted to make sure I said thank you for that, because that is a lot of work each morning is to put together that list. So we've been working as a school on hiring for the positions that we currently have due to some retirements and then other dominoes that have fallen as a result of that. We are very pleased with the candidates that you'll be voting on tonight. So we think they're going to be a great addition to our team. The last thing I wanted to say, and probably the most important thing that I can say over and over again, is our students and staff have been absolute rock stars. This has been a long, long year, and everybody keeps going, they keep showing up, they keep having smiles on their face. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that it was that way at the beginning of the year, and it's still that way now. Everybody's a little bit more tired, but they continue to push through, and our staff is doing a tremendous job to make this a good year for our students, even with all the stuff we have going on. So that's all I have. I'll talk more later.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll hit the assistant principals. I see Kyle hiding in the back corner there.
Anything that I had to offer has already been said. Thank you, Erica, for those words, and she made reference to the assessments that we're doing, and Jason and Chad have already covered it, so we're right in the middle of it, and we're moving forward with it, so thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And is Mr. Hensby online?
He was having internet difficulties.
Okay.
When he texted me about an hour ago, he was on the phone with Comcast, so I don't know if he's on or not.
Michelle, can you tell if he's on?
He's on.
No?
No.
No, okay. All right. Well, he's got another month with us, so we'll get him next month. All right. Let's see. Get our, I guess that's our assistants. Why don't we start with Jim over here, athletics.
I won't go to the podium because it'll be really brief. Athletics went great. We're past the halfway point. And on some good news, we were able to purchase a pole vault mat. So pole vault will return as an event next year. And I'm very happy we found the resources to do that.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yeah. Who do we? Doing all the math, I'm not sure. We have Michelle and.
Hillary.
Oh, okay. We had met actually face to face. All right, great. Thank you. Michelle, do you have anything?
I'll just reiterate, we're in the middle of state testing. Okay. And
Such enthusiasm.
and we started the work of looking, as was referenced by Jason, for the math screener. We're not ready to go prime time with that yet, so I'll save and talk about that more when we have a little bit more information, but we're working on that for K-12. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Michelle. Shelley Phillips.
I'll be just a few minutes, but just to kind of catch everybody up where we are. We've been working hard cleaning up around the facilities and the campus from winter and our COVID projects. Public Works stepped up to the plate and helped us out last week, taking care of a lot of debris that we needed hauled off, and they were wonderful. They reminded me that they like donuts, especially from Hellman's Bakery. So I believe me, I was very glad to go get a couple dozen donuts for them to help at Hellman's. They were a huge help. They hauled a lot of debris off for us that we just couldn't manage ourselves. So it was a huge help, and I was very grateful. Our outside classroom at Winslow Elementary will be completed tomorrow. Charlie will be finishing up with the last of the seeding and the fertilizing, and I'm really excited about that. I hope the folks at the elementary like it. I've been so excited to get that done. We're gonna bring the benches over tomorrow so that they'll have those. So after tomorrow, they can start using that space at any time. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll start working on the high school and the junior high outside classrooms. We'll put the canopies on tomorrow. And then Harry and his helper and Charlie will start laying, the outside perimeter pavers, and they'll get that done. Charlie's been busy on the fields. Jim's been fortunate. Everything that he's had scheduled has pretty much been able to play on our field, so we've been lucky. And the next thing, we'll finish cleaning up around the facilities and the buildings and the grounds, and we'll start planning for graduation for Chad. So that's what's on our calendar next. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay. Mary.
It's nice to see everybody in person. I have a couple of sort of behind the scenes things to talk about, which I guess is probably a sign that we're starting to come back to normal. One of them is I wanted to update you on our title funding for this year. You know that we receive a certain amount of funding from the federal government to support a variety of different things, but primarily for remedial reading support and math support, probably at the elementary school. We were concerned because that funding is rooted in our free and reduced lunch percentages. And when the free and reduced lunch applications were kind of put on the back burner because of the change to the universal lunch program, we weren't sure exactly how that was going to impact us. So we have, at least on the free and reduced lunch side of things, whatever formula they used, we came out about $25,000 to the good for the three titles that they funded us, which is Title I, Title II, and Title IV. On the downside, in the previous federal administration, there was a bit of a battle going on about Title V funding. And last year, none of the schools in Maine initially got Title V funding, and then the congressional delegation kind of went to bat. We ended up receiving that money after all, but they did it with a different calculation, and Winslow ended up this year with no Title V funding. They used, rather than free and reduced lunch for that, they used a poverty threshold. So I guess it's again a good news, bad news situation. Winslow did not meet the poverty threshold, which is a good news side of things. On the downside, we lost $15,000 in funding on that. So they're hopeful that they'll be able to revert to the previous way of doing business so that next year we'll be able to come back up to that type of funding. So that's where we are with that. Applications will start going in. We'll start working on those in the next month or two. The other bit of news I wanted to let you know is on the Certification Governing Board front. As you know, we are still consolidated. The KGB, the Kennebec Governing Board, is a consolidated functioning group of teachers who work to support certification and ed tech authorization for Waterville, Winslow, and Vassaboro. That group joined together at the beginning of the AOS. At the dissolution of the AOS, they decided that they were still working well together, and so decided to keep going. At the point where I said I was stepping away, we revisited the question, was it time to split that group up? And they felt as though they would like to continue. The good news for you is that they have also offered, recommended for Trish Souveny to be the chair of that. She's a Waterville High School teacher, and I think she's going to be a terrific person to lead that group going forward. So I think you're in good hands in terms of that certification support system. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. You have one more of these meetings to go to? So John, right?
Yeah.
John is here from food service. I don't think we've actually met.
First time in person.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Just one update for everyone. Recently, I applied for a grant for the food service program for the summer program, and we were awarded the max of $10,000 to help support the program. So program, I'm setting that up right now as we speak. I'm looking to add one, maybe two more sites for this year. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Talking about the summer program later on the agenda, right? Okay. All right, get everybody here. Who do we have online for administrators and stuff?
Thurston is online.
Who was that?
Mr. Thurston is online.
Okay. Anyone else?
Some people from the city or town.
Right here.
Yeah.
Ray and Erica.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll start with Mike Thurston. Mike, did you have anything from the WEA you wanted to add to the meeting?
Nothing really specific. I do need to correct something. Trish Souvigny is a Winslow teacher. She's just called a Waterville teacher. She's in my department. I can't let that go. And she'll do a great job as the chair of the. Sorry. And the only other thing is I'm looking forward to the discussions tonight about the opening of school in the fall, which seems to be changing by the hour, which I think is a great thing. And hopefully we'll be back to somewhat normal in September. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Ray, Karen, you're online. Did you have anything to add to our meeting?
Nope, nothing at all right now. We have, tomorrow night we have a meeting for the junior high for the town council special meeting with KV Cap and the junior high. And there's been a lot of activity over the last whole month and that. And so I think after tomorrow night, we'll have a pretty clear path and hopefully, we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you very much. Erica LaCroix, did you have anything to add to our meeting?
Hello, everybody. I'm mostly here to hear about the school opening plans, which I also think is very exciting. Also wanted to reiterate again, thank you to all of you for your efforts on this year's budget. If you did not see the message I put out there to the public about the school and urging people to vote yes on the ballot, it's out there because I honestly believe you all have done a wonderful job and sincerely appreciate your efforts toward that end. So trying to give you support wherever I can.
We appreciate that, Erica. It was a very well-written piece, and it was important, I think, to make sure the public is informed as to the status of the school budget and how that references to the town budget and obviously their needs, which I think you expressed pretty well also. So, and just the summarized version from the school budget standpoint for anybody tuning in that isn't aware, I mean, the local request for funding for the town, resources was actually $17,000 less in the upcoming budget than the current year budget that we're concluding within the next couple of months. So, so that was good news, and we're doing the best we can to be physically prudent. So again, when the date of that vote is the June 8th. So people can get out there and vote for the school budget ratification. That would be great. It's the only thing on the ballot, so, but it's an important vote to support our schools. So thank you very much. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was everybody. Finance assistance report.
Good evening, everyone. We are now 86.85% into our fiscal year, and 84.28% of our budget has been accounted for. And this does include the one-cost items that we bought out of next year's budget in order to get that number down, except for a computer lease. I'm just waiting on that invoice, and then all of those items will be taken care of.
Very good. Any questions? Everything's good? Okay. Thank you. Next up, superintendent's report.
You may have seen in the paper, several school districts in the area have had conversations about having a vaccination clinic for students ages 12 and up. We also have been approached by a local pharmacy to see if we want to participate in that process as well. We said that we would like to participate in that, and we'd like to survey our parents and see what kind of input we get, feedback from our parents. And so survey did go out for junior high, senior high staff and students, and out of, I believe it was 369 responses, 167 people indicated that they would be very interested in going through with that. Others had already indicated that they've already had vaccines, so that's another good sign. And so this is a very positive thing for us getting closer to getting in school and having students vaccinated, because we know that's going to play out in the long run in some way, form, or manner. So that first vaccine is going to take place on June 16th. The next one is going to take place on July 7th. And I believe the clinic at this point is set up to be at Waterville High School, and that is Waterville High School, Mike. And we will have more information as we get closer to that date. The next thing that I have for you, I'd just like to take a moment to read a quick piece, because we often recognize our students, which is awesome. We often recognize our staff members for doing something exceptionally well, and that's awesome as well. We have a kind of a staff member that I would like to recognize tonight, and he's sitting right here in front of me, and it's school board member Earl Watts. And what I'd like to recognize Earl for is the fact that he is a James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation Fellow Award winner. And just to read a little bit about that to you, the James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation of Alexandria, Virginia announced today that it has selected 57 James Madison Fellows for 2021 in its 13th annual fellowship competition. James Madison Fellowships support graduate study of American history by aspiring, experienced secondary school teachers of American history, American government, and civics. The 57 James Madison Fellows were selected in competition with applications from each of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the nation's island and trust territories. The fellowships are funded by income from a trust fund in the Treasury of the United States and from additional privilege grants, corporate contributions, and foundation grants. Recipients are required to teach American history or civics in a secondary school for at least 1 year of each of their fellowship support. The award is intended to recognize promising and distinguished teachers, to strengthen their knowledge of the origins and development of American constitutional government, and thus to expose the nation's secondary school students to accurate knowledge of the nation's constitutional heritage. So it's an honor to be selected, Earl. And I congratulate you for being selected. And it's an honor for all of us to have an educator on board with us and helping us with our decisions as well. So congratulations. The next piece that I have, I'm going to turn it over to Joel for some quick words about something.
So while we're recognizing people, I just wanted to take the opportunity to recognize with a certificate of appreciation for Jeff Riddell, who's one of our board members who is online right now. Jeff has been with us, I don't know how long exactly, not terribly long, as he came to Winslow, and he has been on our board for a while, filling a vacancy. And unfortunately, Jeff is going to be leaving us as he's relocating for his employment, and which also is going to bring him closer to his family or his wife's family, I'm not sure which. And so Jeff is Well, thank you, Jeff, for being a member of our board and helping contribute to the efforts of what the board work entails. And thank you for your time and efforts. And I will contact you to get you this certificate of appreciation and wish you well in your new endeavors.
Well, that's very much appreciated. Thank you so much, Joel and everybody. Yeah, I'm so sorry I couldn't make it there. Work ran a little late tonight, but you know, it's been my pleasure. I really appreciate this opportunity. I really learned a lot. You know, we're sad to go, as I mentioned last meeting, but thank you again, everybody. It really has been a wonderful experience, and Winslow has been a great community to live in, and my family and I have nothing but good things to say, and we'll definitely miss all of you and miss this place. So, but the elementary, you know, that's where we had most of our experiences, and I think the admin staff and all the teachers have been absolutely wonderful, and like I said, we are going to miss this place tremendously, and I just hope that the community we're moving to will be half as good. So, but thanks again. I appreciate the recognition, and like I said, I'm sorry I couldn't make it.
Thank you, Jeff, and I will contact you about getting this to you. Again, thank you very much, and good luck in your future endeavors. And if I'm not mistaken, you are resigning effective at the end of this meeting, is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, did you have anything else for the superintendent's report? Okay, very good. Old business. So we have the second reading of the 2021-22 school calendar. Any changes, updates, or questions from our last view of this?
No real changes. I think this aligns quite nicely with the tech center so that we have similar days that we need to have in order to be in compliance with the law. It also aligns quite nicely with Audible's calendar, and the reason that that's important is for sharing classes at the high school. And that, pretty straightforward. We do not have the board dates on this calendar yet, but that's on the agenda for tonight for your approval. Once those dates are on there, once you approve the days, we will add them to this calendar.
Move to approve. We have a motion to approve the second reading with the inclusion of the board dates. Got those? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Nate. Any discussion, questions, or otherwise? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the school calendar as presented?
Yes.
Okay. All opposed? Okay, we have one opposed.
Ending on a Monday.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it won't snow. All right. All right. So next up, return to school plan. So highly awaited topic.
We have a presentation for you that Michelle is going to up there for us. I'm not sure if I should stand here. I guess I'll look for Jason's right here, probably out of the way enough so people can see in the audience here. I think, yeah. Let's go to the first slide. Let's get right into it. So I think something that is really important to mention is this first slide. Change is the only constant. We have been operating this way all year, where everything changes on a daily and lately hourly basis. We've put a tremendous amount of work, when I say we, the administrative team, input from staff, input from FLT members, input from teachers, have put a lot of work in the plan that you're going to see this evening. with the idea that all students will be back to full in-person learning next year. And I had said regardless of whether or not the guidelines change, and I didn't mean that to be a negative. What I meant by that was we were being proactive in putting a plan together, not knowing if the 3-foot distancing would still be a requirement next fall. We knew that if it was still a requirement, we needed to do something different. And so we've put a plan together so that if the requirements were still in place, we would be able to have all students back. So let's go to the next piece. So I just mentioned that our Achilles heel, if you will, has been the social distancing, the 3 feet of space between students. Now, I will say this right now. I'm holding in my hand Cliff Notes of a 22-page document that came out on Friday with strike-throughs, and we received today as a clean document of changes, proposed changes to the guidelines for reopening of schools next year. We haven't had a chance to truly sit down and digest all of these pieces. We're going to do this Wednesday with the administrative team and the nurses. But I will tell you that as a result of some of these changes, it could change everything you're going to see here this evening. And the reason that I say that is because one of the changes that they've made in this document is something that they call pool testing. And pool testing, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't know enough about it to really explain it to you. But one of the pieces in this pool testing is that they randomly test staff members and students, and who agree to it. And you have to have 30% of your students and staff agreeing to it to have a large enough sampling. The test results all go together in one pool because it's quick to do that. If they find a positive in that, then they have to start doing additional testing to find out where that positive might be. There are all kinds of little pieces that go along with that. But the reason that that's important is because if you agree to doing pool testing, the 3-foot requirement becomes a recommendation, not a requirement. That's huge, because if something is required, you must. If it's a recommendation, you can consider. So that's really, hang on to that piece because that's big. More to come once we know more about that. So the other thing that this plan requires is space, of course. And the space for us is once again the old junior high school. Erica LaCroix, the town manager, Ray Karen, town council chair, the town council, has been extremely gracious in working with us and saying, if we need that space, the school is a priority because everybody understands the importance of getting all kids back in school to in-person learning. So they have committed the old building to us if that is something that we need to have. This plan calls for that building. I just got through mentioning pool testing. If we go down that road, we may not need this building. So everything right now is still up in the air. We're going to revisit all of this with the administrators on Wednesday, find out more about what this pool testing really requires us to do, and go from there. Cost. This plan that you're going to see this evening has about $1.7 million in it. None of that 1.7 it comes from local taxes, none of it. It's all money from the COVID, the ESSER funding. That's a really important piece to know because we've heard different things. How much is this going to cost the local taxpayer? It's not. It's all ESSER funding. The other thing, and it was already mentioned, and Joel mentioned that, and Erica mentioned it a little bit earlier. Our budget this year, our local budget, has come in essentially flat funding from on the local side. It's actually a little bit less, as Joel mentioned, 17,000 less. So there's no increase to the local taxes as a result of the school budget, which is a first that's from a long time, I believe. So what are the benefits to the plan that you're going to see tonight? Smaller class sizes. Everybody, Chad's going to tell you what he's done. Jason's going to tell you what he's done. All the building principals are going to tell you what they've done in order to reduce those classes, to support individual needs. When we talk about individual needs, we talk about academically, socially, and emotionally, because we talk about all of those areas since we've been through this all year. Opportunities to accelerate learning. If you have smaller class sizes, you can accelerate learning, give the students some of the attention, more attention that they need. And the last thing that we have on it is an insurance policy. Well, before we heard about pool testing on Friday and today, the insurance policy for us was, what if the 3-foot distancing requirements doesn't go away? We wanted to plan now in order to ensure that our students would be in school in the fall. And so this plan was an insurance policy that if the 3-foot distancing didn't go away, we'd still have our kids in school. So that was very important to us and to the community. What are some of the implications? Students might be in a different location, grade 6, for example, at the old junior high. You might have some high school students that might be at the old junior high if they needed an extra section of something. The cost for additional staffing, we talked about that a little bit, and the resources, it's federally funded. Programming could be a little bit different. You'll hear how that could be a little different as each of the building administrators give their presentations tonight. And we're not going to go into the weeds. We're not going to go into the weeds because of the most recent information we've heard. We want to give you an overview of this plan so that you understand that this plan will get all students back if this is the route we go. That's really the important message that we want to tell everybody. So, first up is the elementary school with Eric.
So basically, this is almost like a worst case scenario.
At this point, this is the best case scenario because we can have all kids back in school, right, even if the 3-foot distancing doesn't go away.
So as Peter said, change is the only constant. So when we left our last meeting, you had tasked us with make a plan that gets everybody back, basically no matter what. So what we did at the elementary is we looked at our floor plan and we looked at what is our capacity? How many students can fit in each space? And what is our current enrollment? So we took the chart, our floor plan, we marked it all out, we marked our current enrollments. And in order to make sure that even if the 3-foot spacing still exists, we came up with this plan. Space. We've already talked about the fact that in order for us to have enough space in our building for all the current K-5 students, we would need 6th grade and the childcare to remain at the old junior high school. That would be the only way that we would have enough physical space. We would also need 4 additional in-person classroom teachers to meet the enrollment and capacity situation that we have. So basically, we would need 4 more classrooms, which we would be able to have if the 6th grade and childcare stays at the old junior high, but then we would need 4 teachers to cover the enrollment that wouldn't fit in the remainder of those classrooms. So we would have smaller class sizes just by simply having social distancing. I know we think about this 3-foot rule as a bad thing, but it does have some advantages. We would have smaller class sizes, which would help us address our students' needs in a post-pandemic world. We know that there are going to be some things we need to address, that this would be something that would allow us to do that. Remote learning would remain an option. This is one of the things we're still trying to sift out at the elementary level. It looks a little bit different for kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade students than it might look for even some of the older kids within our building, but certainly maybe older kids at the junior high and high school. It would not be able to be the same as it was this year. This year, because of the numbers that we had for remote learners, we were able to match one of our staff members with one remote class. So it's likely that it would need to be a multi-grade or age situation, and we would probably need at least 2 remote teachers to cover that need And it might require some programs. The junior high and high school talk about the programs that they have, their remote learning programs. So we would need to be flexible and think more about what that should look like at the K-5 level. So due to the significant demands on our nurses, and I can't iterate this enough, that we need to have more nurse coverage. So our nurse on a daily basis is trying to check in with any families of students who are not present to find out why they are not in our building, to make sure that they don't have any symptoms that might really be related to COVID that she needs to follow up on, while also doing the regular job of somebody bumps their head on the playground, somebody has a medication they need to take, and COVID isn't going away, so there's still going to be layers of that tracking that need to be done on a daily basis, and we would have everybody in the building at the same time. So that would be double the amount of keeping track of who's out and why they're out, and following up, and double the amount of bumps and scrapes and things of that nature that come into play. So we would need an additional nurse. And we would also need our 2 consistent, we call them super subs this year. They're basically 2 subs that we have as part of our COVID budget that come every day. And we need them every day. So that would be something else that at the elementary level we would need in order to make sure to get all students back next year. Questions? Yes.
What are you projecting as far as requirements that would make somebody be a remote student? How are you going to assess who needs to be remote, vice who should be in the classroom?
So again, we're still working through that. Part of it will be after this school year, we can reflect upon what went well and didn't go well, and what are some of the factors that come into play for those who are successful and not successful. Obviously, some of it has to do with what parents request, but we're hopeful to outline, now that the pandemic is not, and we hope it doesn't go back, in a situation where it's as dire, people are as concerned, to try to set more clear parameters about what the expectations are for all components, but I think we need to reflect on it more before we can put all of those things into a more concrete plan.
What appears to me to be likely to be a really large hurdle over the summer is the timing and the practice of staff hiring. When do you decide to start hiring these people? Because the later you start, the smaller the pool is going to be, and arguably the most, the people who look best on paper may be gone from that pool. So you can't really win. You hire sooner, you may have a better pool, but you may be in a situation where you hire people you don't need, and if you hire later, the opposite.
Yeah, so
one of the things that we're gonna do, Jay, was with your approval of this plan, if this is the plan that we end up going with, we were gonna advertise immediately. However, now that we know that we have another pathway to get all kids in school, we can, after we've had an administrative meeting on Wednesday, advertise for anticipated openings in these positions to get the ball rolling as we continue to decide which way we're going to go with the plan. The reason that that's important that we move on that is not only for the reason that you said, but the window is closing. As I had a conversation with Chad earlier today, the window is closing in terms of courses, what are you signing up for, how are we determining how many kids can sign up for a course. All of that is coming, and it's closing not just for Winslow, it's closing for the entire state. This is why you're seeing so many changes happen rapid fire right now, because everybody is saying the same thing. What about the 3-foot spacing? Everybody wants to know what is the answer, what is it going to be? And so in order to try to address that, Jay, that's kind of how we're going to move forward with it.
John, go ahead.
So if I to understand that if the COVID dollars are still gonna be available, even if the CDC guidelines change before that?
The COVID dollars are still going to be available because there are other pieces that you can use the COVID dollars for.
But I mean, for the staff, Jay, I like your question a lot.
Yeah.
But the timing of the CDC announcements doesn't matter because the governor and the Department of Education would have to make the decision before. I'm worried about the timing of the dollars availability versus the CDC guideline being announced. I mean, literally, you could hire someone and then they change the thing and now we've committed to paying these people.
Yeah.
Is that COVID money or is that, I mean, we already said we're not gonna spend local money.
Correct. The commitment on the part of the ESSER funds is over 2 years. And so that funding is gonna be there, they've committed to it. So if we hire somebody under the ESSER funding for COVID reasons, it can't be to replace something in your budget. It has to be for COVID related reasons. So to go back to your question, John, I think I hear what you're asking me. If we don't spend all of this money on this plan, what happens to that money?
And if we hire a person with COVID dollars, do they then keep them even if the guidelines change to where we don't need them?
The answer to that would be yes, because the people that we would hire for COVID dollars would be someone like the super sub or somebody who could help us with some of the acceleration that we talked about.
Sounded like there was 4 permanent, not just subs, but 4 permanent.
4 teachers, 1 nurse, and 2 super subs.
Right.
The nurse would definitely be there. The super subs would definitely be there, regardless of the plan. The 4 teachers may not be there if we don't have the need to go to that other building. And so then you ask yourself, well, what happens to those funds?
What happens to those people you just hired? They've committed to work for you for.
But we haven't hired them yet.
No, I'm saying, I realize that you haven't hired them yet, but I'm saying if the timing works out that you hire them and then the CDC guidelines change, you don't need them anymore, but now they don't have a job somewhere else.
You are 100% right, and that's why we're putting the brakes on things a little bit to see how things shake out. In the last 3 days, we've had all these changes.
Right.
So we're putting the brakes on things a little bit, hoping that we get enough of the changes that we can make some good decisions.
But you hit it real quick, but another thing is the point, regardless of what changes there, even if we don't need all these teachers, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, if we don't need all these teachers in the classroom in regards to being the primary teacher in the classroom, the goal is also to have additional staff available to help with the acceleration, to help resolve some of the issues that came about of being in the year that we've had and helping those students get back to where they need to be. Is that?
Absolutely.
So that's, we're gonna use them whether we need them.
I like the idea of smaller classes where you can accelerate regardless of this or not. I mean, regardless of whether kids are in masks, whether they're 18 inches, 3 feet, or 6 feet, if you can have physically kids in classrooms with getting attention instead of on a screen, yeah.
Yeah, well, we can all agree with what you just said. But what I was worried about is
the money.
You're spending a lot of money for positions that we'd like to have, but then all of a sudden, if the CDC guidelines changed, are they gonna say, well, you don't need those people, but you've committed to hiring them.
As long as you write the plan, John, so that what you're using the funds for is a legitimate use of the funding. And Mary sitting back there is writing these plans so that we make sure they pass the straight face test. They go, and get approved, they come back, we have the funding. So there's a process that this goes through.
Well, and I think, if I could also say, I think John highlights something. It would seem logical that the CDC guidelines and the funding are tied together. That you can use the funds for certain things when the CDC guidelines are such, but they aren't. They're on just parallel tracks. So what's happened is they've already authorized the money for all of the purposes related to COVID. So social distancing and PPE and learning loss and supporting students and social emotional, all of these things. regardless of what happens with the pandemic. It's a function of the reality that they had to get that ball moving. And thankfully now it looks like things are improving on the guidelines, but it isn't gonna, changing the guidelines is not gonna jeopardize any of our funding.
I appreciate what you just said. I'm now going to editorialize because I'm expecting more presentations from both the junior high and high school with more positions as well. Multiply that times every community in our state, times 50 states and a lot of other regions. That's a lot of money being spent on something that if the CDC comes out and says we don't need it anymore, and our nation is spending literally billions of dollars. I mean, I just want to say to the listening public, we're spending a lot of money on things that I really think we need. Now, Joel's point about the mentality and the people in our schools, both staff and students, that are going to need support because of the nature of what went on in the last year and a half. I totally understand that is a need, that's a real need, whether COVID goes away or not. Of course, Erica said that COVID's not going to go, but I think that there is going to be a need regardless of what happens with the disease, because it's now a emotional and psychological problem that we have to deal with.
And I think the term Mary used was lost learning. I mean, there was a lot of that. So there's a lot of that needs to be caught back up. If I'm not mistaken, of the money that is earmarked for Winslow under these ESSER funds, and specifically is for the purpose of helping make up all these lost learning and social and emotional supports that need to come out of this. Is that correct?
That is correct. You know, if you look at this whole thing, John, and I totally understand what you're saying, totally hear what you're saying. But I'm going to speak on behalf of this community, because this is the community that I need to speak for, and it's the school district that I need to speak for. And we have a wonderful opportunity to do something really special in this community right now. Because even if we don't use all of this funding to do this plan, we can still use some of this funding to do something you'd never be able to do in this community off local taxpayer dollars. Because one of the pieces, the biggest piece here you keep hearing about, is social distancing. And the only way you can socially distance is if you add space. We know that when we downsized, we were very economical and we're very tight. We've gone to a 2-building campus, which is fantastic. We talked about the cost avoidance that we've done as a result of that, over $600,000 a year. That is absolutely fantastic. But then I get parents that email me and say, why can't Winslow support more kids in the 4-year-old program? I'm trying to get in and we're maxed out. I want my child to go to the 4-year-old program, but I can't get in Winslow. I got to bring my student over to China where they've got a program. If we could utilize some of these funds, if we don't spend them all on this plan, we would have the opportunity to add a section off the elementary school with these funds at no cost to the taxpayer dollar, which would improve your educational system once again and allow you to have more students as part of a 4-year-old program, childcare program. Before and after, you would have an opportunity to do something really great at no cost to anyone. So it's a win-win for us as a community.
I don't want to interrupt you when you're done.
I'm done.
Okay, I totally agree with everything you just said, with one minor thing. When people pay taxes, local taxes get paid out of your right pocket, national taxes get paid out of your left pocket. This money's coming from one of those pockets.
I 100% agree with you, John, but here's what's going to happen. That money that's been designated to Winslow, if you don't use it, it's going to somebody else, and you're still going to pay for it.
We agree 100% on that. I'm just saying,
Well,
think of the amount of money that's
Well,
being
one thing I will
spent.
say, think about it this way. This is another way to think about it. When we've done our school projects here, we've had to do them locally because we did not qualify for state funding for any school buildings, expansions at all, anywhere. Other school districts are getting their buildings paid for. We weren't able to accomplish that because apparently we take care of our buildings too well.
Right.
But,
Thanks, Shelley.
but, so while this is taken out of one pocket or the other, this could be an opportunity to what Peter is saying, that yes, it's not state dollars that we've done all these projects on, but this is an opportunity for us to maybe get a little back the other way where we can use something other than local dollars to do a project that other school systems have had the benefit of doing that we have not.
This reminds me of our taking advantage of the program with the electricity dollars that we're going to gain from solar power. It's just using the system to benefit Winslow. And we have to do that when we have to do that because the option's there. And if we don't do it, it's really hurting the town. And I agree with Peter on that.
Yeah.
Just making a statement of, boy, oh boy.
Well, but
really, here's this.
it is, whichever way the wind blows on that, I understand what you're saying, but that decision was made. And so we need to make the best of it. And in this case, I think, to what Peter was saying, I mean, I think there's an opportunity for us to finally do, I mean, when we did our projects here, we've always done them extremely economically to the point of a fault, I think, in some cases, as we've argued in not too long ago as we started this two-school project. But I think this gives us, should all this work out and we have the resources available after reconciling the programs that need to be in place to help students get back to where they need to be, if we're able to do this, I think it's a big plus, and it provides some space and resources not on the backs of Winslow taxpayers, which is a rarity, quite honestly, because we haven't been able to get state dollars. And I guess to go a step further, quite honestly, is there's potential to help our state funding in regards to the long term, because if we're able to expand the 4-year-old program, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, that will improve our funding coming from the state going forward.
That is true.
So there's a long-term benefit as well.
Well, I certainly appreciate all the work being done by the administrators on this plan, because this, at the time when we first talked about getting this plan going, it was a very smart thing to get ahead of the ball. So kudos to Peter and all the administrators for not only deciding to do this, but to put the work in, even though it could end up being for naught.
Can I add just one more thing? I think one other thing to keep in mind is that the first two grants that we received, or the first, what we looked at is the first amounts that we spent out, really were much more related to getting those schools up and running, emergency COVID related. The CARES Act money that is coming now is as much a stimulus plan and an economic recovery plan as it is something to address the pandemic per se. And so I think one of the things when if you're feeling maybe a little questioning about should we be spending this money for things that maybe we don't see are immediately COVID related, remember that funding is to support school infrastructure, which it was determined has really been sadly neglected over the years, to improve school conditions. So in addition to the things related to student learning and COVID, it really is also an economic recovery and a stimulus bill. And so I think the way that succeeds is by putting that money back into the economy and doing some of the things that we've talked about. So I think it's just thinking about those funds a little bit differently.
I actually want to take a second just to say thank you to Jay, because I hadn't thought of that point that you made, and I thought that was a very valid point. So thank you.
So I'm presuming that we'll hear more, as to your point, that we'll hear more from the other schools regarding any potential needs for teachers, but of course, this is all subject to change. Before Erica runs off, does anybody have questions for Erica?
She's doing a great job. She can keep going.
Yeah, we just presented.
I enjoy opening a good can of worms now and then.
Well, it's an appropriate can of worms, because it is a point that we do, if with or without this plan, there's going to be a certain need for some additional personnel to help with the recovery of our educational system that's taken a beating over the past year. And that's definitely, no matter what space we're in, there's some serious needs out there, and this will help that, and we'll see how it develops as the changes come into effect. But this is obviously, what did you term it? The best of the worst case. So hopefully, if we get the best of the best case by the time we're all done and they come out with guidelines, final guidelines. So.
Well, I think Jay's point is one of concern for everybody in the entire state, because you may not have enough teachers to do what everybody wants to do. I mean, and I hear what you're saying loud and clear, Jay. I think I cut Erica off, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think what she was going to say is that she's been interviewing a lot of candidates, and I think she knows that she can go back and talk to some people very quickly if we move forward. That would fill in some of these positions perhaps very nicely if we were to move quickly enough on it. That being said, we don't want to hire people if we don't need them. So we have all these balls rolling in the air, and what is the best pathway for us to go that is going to be supportive of our kids, that's going to get our kids in school, because we heard you loud and clear, and it's what everybody's been saying, it's what we've been saying, we want our kids in school, however we need to do it. So there's no easy answer on this one. It requires a little thinking. And you have to think quickly, because there's a lot going on every day.
A follow-up question would be whether or not any of these positions could be structured as long-term sub positions so that they aren't necessarily committing for a full year, because I don't want us to be at the end of the line when it comes to hiring all of those teachers that all over the country people are trying to hire. I'd rather have us ahead of that line. And if it requires taking, even one of the four positions and structuring it as a long-term sub so that we can get three of them hired right away without risking every dollar that we have in that pool. Think however we can creatively get our hiring up front, because I've hired a lot of teachers, and I can tell you the top of that candidate pool is a completely different kettle of fish than the bottom of that candidate pool. And we want to be hiring off the top if we can do it. I'd rather have one person off the top than two off the bottom.
So toward that end, if I'm not mistaken, I think given that there's a lot of balls in the air, as you mentioned, that will at some point be at a point where we're going to hire some people, but they might not know exactly which classroom they're going to be in. You're going to hire an elementary teacher or however many. And if the plan isn't finalized, that you're going to start the hiring process. Is that correct?
That would be my hope, would be that however whatever amount of positions we determine will be elementary. It won't be specific to a third grade or a first grade, because the reality is things are changing.
Don't hire those.
And it'll also be impacted by remote student numbers. So they have to be flexible.
I think it's probably in some ways easier at the elementary school than say the high school, where we're going to need an additional social studies teacher or something where you've got a specific certification to make into play. But at the elementary, it's a little broader. So, Michelle.
I think one of the challenges we've been talking about as well is finding that sweet spot for where we can do this, get our kids back to school, and also be prepared if the CDC or the pandemic takes a turn for the worse and they put restrictions back in place, that we have enough, built into whatever plan we go with, that we can still keep our kids in our space and so forth. So the challenge is finding that sweet spot for timing of hiring, how many do we really need, the finances of all that. So there's a lot of factors that we've been wrestling with and grappling with. but we're working hard to find this. You know, it's like that perfect spot. And that's why I think we refer to it as an insurance policy. Whatever we decide on, we commit to it, because we can't be willy-nilly throughout the year. It's gotta be something that will allow us to move slightly in either direction, but keep us on course.
Resiliency to absorb the bumps in the road, whatever they are.
Right.
And still keep everybody in person. Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions on the elementary before we move on to junior high?
I'm actually going to start with the third bullet down. We talked a lot about mental health, and Peter alluded to this at the beginning. There is an academic component, but there's an emotional and a social component as well. And that's not necessarily, that's in a quote unquote normal school year for a middle school child. Developmental process and the needs for our kids at this age. If you have a middle school child or have had a middle school child, you understand what I'm referencing. And so now you add the pandemic, many kids that are from remote to dealing with COVID, it's just been, and I've talked about this, I think, at every single board meeting thus far. So this is really bullet number 3 is the foundation for us. And when we talk about as a district, the need for social work and to address the foundational needs for our students. Our K-6 social worker is at capacity. Our 7 through 12 social worker that we share is at capacity. Our school counselors are at capacity with the number of kids they're meeting. And we've got a lot of needs. So that, I would say, is definitely one thing that regardless of the change, as we return all kids, there's going to be some challenges. Kind of working back and forth here, but if you jump back to grade 6, I think we've already covered that one. The second bullet, grade 6 will be located at the original junior high school building. That in a sense is how we did it this year. So there's not a whole lot of change. It's more the logistics to try to incorporate class sizes of 16 to 18 rather than the 7 or 8. So one of those examples in order to do that would be moving the UA classes to an upstairs space rather than the existing spaces they use across from the library. Shelley, Jennifer, Chad, and I are going to do a walkthrough sometime this week. I think we have a meeting to kind of look at the classroom sizes if all students are back. Some of the existing classroom spaces that we're using would have to be relocated. So it's not only people that we're hiring, it's planning so that I can let Shelley know, look, we need another room. We got to move a lot of things. So there's a lot of components that go into this. The top bullet is the remote learning platform. One of the things that we do not know, and the question was asked, was the criteria for remote learning in the fall. We're not sure yet how many students will remain remote learners. We have the figures at every grade level of the current remote learners, and is that going to change in the fall, and what's the expectation? So those are further discussions that we'll have at the admin meeting. What we do know is Chad and I attended, well, Chad's attended a couple, but I was fortunate to join a presentation about probably a month ago now, a platform courseware that Earl, I think you're familiar with, a branch of Odyssey, where they do offer grades 6 through 12 remote, a remote platform for our kids. So what that would do for the middle school is currently we have teachers in a 6-period day. Every teacher is teaching a remote class. With this platform, we could remove that responsibility, add another in-person class to once again decrease class sizes. So that's a pretty easy fix. It's a great program. However, it would require an adult to oversee that program. And Earl's going to give us a tutorial at some point, but so there would be someone needed. So when we talk about people and what we need, I know Chad's probably putting in for someone to oversee that 1 or 2 people. I think the numbers will drive how many I need to oversee that. If we had 50 students in the middle school, 6, 7, and 8, that were remote learning next year, then we may need 2 people. If it's so, those are just some other questions that we don't have answers to at this point in time. But we do know there is a pretty good platform that is available. Grade 6 we covered, social work we covered. Adding staff, this again, I'm not getting in the weeds, it's just kind of an overview. It could look a little bit like utility players. Currently we have a part-time art teacher, for example, that covers secretarial duties at the other building, because you have to cover lunches and such for secretaries. So as I looked at different things, I looked at learning labs, which would be accelerating, let's use math for an example. Students would go to their math class and then get extra supports in learning labs with a specialist to accelerate that learning. We would need assistance with duties because there's probably capacity for 40 individual desks in the 6th grade building if they keep the 6-foot distancing for lunch. So you still, if you return 85, 90 kids, you'd have to run 2 lunches for coverage. So there's those type of logistics, but those people could be utility players where maybe they're doing some secretarial duties, answering phone, but then doing lunch duties, so not necessarily teaching, like Erica had the teachers, but just kind of brainstorming. Regarding the 7th and 8th scheduling, it's a lot of just adjusting. It's conversations with Chad because we do have 8, 9 core people that are shared within all 3 buildings, some of them just in the 2 buildings. So it's conversations about, hey, when are you running music so I can use someone for coverage? We have a PE teacher that goes to me and the elementary school. We have a band teacher that goes to all 3 schools, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely more conversations that need to take place in regards to sharing the personnel. But that's just kind of a general overview. A lot of it, we do have shared spaces in the 7th and 8th grade building. Chad and I will have to discuss the lunch situation in regards to, do we run more lunches or try to have more capacity and more space? So we've met a little bit to talk about logistics in the gymnasium and such. And again, in like a worst case scenario to try to get kids back. Any questions?
I have a question, but it's not related to the junior high. I apologize. Your question brought up another question in my mind. If you're going to start a hiring process for teachers, at what level, Mr. Tita, which organization or which person determines the rate at which you're going to offer pay? In other words, if we wanted to get those top of the, is there a reason we can't offer a higher pay? Or, maybe Mike has a response to that. But you know what I'm saying? If we're spending the national, what was Mary's term?
ESSER funds.
ESSER funds. If we're spending their funds, is there a limit to what we can pay? Or
you said Mike, but I think I'd like to chime in on an answer on that one, John.
Yeah.
I think our staff have given of their hearts and soul this year.
Right.
And I think if we went out and we hired people and we paid them at a higher rate than what you're currently paying people in the contract that we've negotiated, I think that would be doing a severe disservice.
No, but I'm saying
folks who are here.
you have a right to pick someone at whatever level of education or experience they have, right?
I would not do that because, again, I want to be respectful of our staff here at the levels that they're at. And quite frankly, you're not going to get a 20-year veteran to come here for a year potentially.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You're going to get somebody who doesn't have the experience. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. So they're going to be entering types of individuals.
I was more worried about what he said about picking out the bottom of the barrel and us avoiding that situation.
I think anytime we hire, we hire the best candidate for the position. I don't think we look at least I would never look at, well, this one's cheaper and we can't afford this one because they have a master's degree. Like, I'm bringing the best name to Peter for him to.
I'm just saying, the part of the decision loop in our spending has always been budget. And if we're not paying the budget, is there any reason why that wouldn't come into play?
Well, I mean, typically, I think what we've done is what Chad has said, if I'm not mistaken, is we hire the best person we can find, and wherever they fall on their experience scale in regards to the contract is what we pay.
Okay, I see.
I've never been told, no, you can't hire that person because they're gonna be too expensive. Like that. I would try to work in a district that told me that.
But that's permanent hires. These are temporary, right?
Well, you never know how it's gonna work out.
They are temporary, John, but I think you have a contract that you're working on, that you've an agreement that you have with your teachers. When you hire these people, they become your teacher. It's
they're part of that contract.
They're part of that same contract.
Okay.
So we can't put them someplace else on the contract for a number of reasons.
Well, you made it sound like the government's paying for them, so they're under government contract.
They're paying for them, but they're under our contract.
Okay.
So, and to that end, I mean, also just to touch base on that, I mean, I just touched on briefly, I mean, we might hire some people that, you know, right now it looks like they might be 1 year. But who knows how many retirements we're gonna have, other positions that'll open up, other things that happen. I mean, you've had all kinds of transfers with the retirements that have come up this year and other such things, that who knows how many of those people might become permanent. They want to have a shot at Winslow and this is their foot in the door. I think we're a great school system and this might be their foot in to that end. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Michelle.
Another thing we can think about is in hiring people, if we were to, you know, less experience or whatever we could, another thing to think about is what supports can we offer when we bring our people together for our new people. So if you're someone with a little less experience and whatnot, I mean, everybody has potential to grow and learn. But as we expect our kids to do, I expect our teachers to do that. So that's something we can think about too, is what support will we give whatever people we have to bring on board. And maybe it's a little more formal than we've done in the past. That's something we probably think about, how we're going to support those people and make sure that we're doing our kids the right service.
My question was a form of brainstorming, kind of just throwing an idea up there, because this is an unusual situation. We're going to be in a tough boat, and I agree with Jay.
Well, just to carry on with what Michelle's saying, if I'm not mistaken, obviously the less experienced teachers that we've hired in the past, we have a process of mentoring and so forth within our school system anyway. So this is just going to be an expansion of that if necessary, given the needs that we're going to have in front of us. Is that the summation of?
That's what I'm thinking. We already do, like I've done new teacher groups in the Winslow, where we've met. It's difficult this year, but in the past it's been really nice to meet with that group once a month, and I go do classroom observations, and they go to visit other classrooms. And we've really done some cool things in the past, and I'm thinking that would be necessary in these circumstances to make sure those people have ample support from us so that they can be doing the best by our kids when they're in the room.
And I'm also presuming that's been subsided a bit this year with the cohorts and such, that you haven't been able to do that as you typically have done. So.
Mr. Price wants to speak.
Go ahead.
I would just add that it hurts the subpool, but sometimes some of our best candidates have been with us. We know who they are because they started out as substitutes, and then they decide they want to move into a teaching position. Or I've also heard superintendents say some of their best teachers started out as head techs. They had that on the ground, they worked their way through that process. So we see that happening. So it puts a little pressure on us on the other side when we pull a sub away, offer a job, but that cycle seems to. People want to work here in Winslow. I've seen applications that they'll pass up other places because they want to be here.
I think that bodes well. So let me get Earl first.
Sure.
Back to John.
One thing that for the courseware and the Odysseyware, as you move into the higher grades, you're going to want to have an SME for the specific areas. So because of the written responses, you're going to want a social studies teacher to look at social studies stuff, English teacher to look at English stuff, math stuff. Now, I'm doing that and I'm fielding 25 to 30 different responses daily. If my thought process is this is COVID related, so that could probably, possibly, potentially be put on a schedule for a stipend to make that available for a teacher now as like an additional duty, but it could be COVID related.
How many do you have on your caseload?
It depends on who's enrolled. I mean, I've got probably 25 students that I'm responsible for grading their responses. Now, they may do a lesson where they're responding to 30 different questions, but only 3 of those are written. Depending upon the nature of the question, list the 4 parts of the Justinian Code, or what are 3 things that are significant about 1619. It depends on the amount of time that that individual's spending. I spend between an hour to 2 hours every day grading Odyssey-ware stuff, but it would be a way to guarantee that you have that subject matter expert looking at it, and you're paying for it because it's like it's a COVID-related expense. I mean, that's why they're doing the courseware.
Right. I have another question. I don't know if my question is for Mary or for Peter. Is there any CARES or COVID money, whatever you want to call it, for professional development? Meaning, could we be helping our teachers become better teachers through any?
Yeah, one of the categories is called staff supports. So that would certainly, you could write a project that would relate to that if that were necessary and if it weren't already funded with other things that you have in your district. So for instance, we have Title II funding for professional development, so it would have to be something that would be beyond what our existing.
Seems like this would be a great time to get all of our staff enrolled in whatever they want to do, if that's being paid for away from local funds. I would love to see them all take courses and get any professional development that they've been interested in that could be paid for by COVID money.
So you already have a substantial benefit to teachers that's part of their contract for coursework that is already funded through the local budget. But there are restrictions on it, so perhaps if you wanted to offer, different kinds of professional development, that would be something that could be explored.
Just an idea.
I'm sure the teachers have taken on a lot of extra because of the load that they've had this year.
Well, it's all voluntary, is my point.
But I'm hoping
we wouldn't force them to do professional development.
Get beyond that. We're not in.
Some of them want to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Is any other question for Jason?
I'm done.
He's going quick. He's going quick.
Oh, I thought you
No,
stay up there and keep talking.
Mr. Bell.
All right, I try not to repeat a lot of what my 2 counterparts had talked about, but again, our goal is to get all students back in the building safely, and while still having a remote option for students and families that may need the remote option. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at the master schedule and building it with small classes in mind. So what I mean by that is if there's a classroom that we can only fit 12 desks based off the 3-foot distancing requirement, then we're building that class with 12 students in it. That way we don't get it, because one of the issues we had this year was, if you remember me talking about it at previous meetings, was there are some classes where there may be 3 kids in a class on that one cohort. Well, in the other cohort, there may be 15 in that class. And out of that other 15, maybe there's 3 or 4 that might be remote. So it worked in that way. So building it with that in mind, looking at the classes, and over the last 2 weeks, we've had leadership team meetings where we talked about it. The department chairs then went back to their departments, and on the last in-service day, so last Monday, the 10th, they went around and looked at every single class and said, okay, where is it now? Let's look at the spacing. Can we squeeze one more desk? Can we squeeze another row if we move some things around? They really did that work, rolled up their sleeves, and really came back with a proposal and said, okay, in this class, this is what we can do in this class. So then we looked at course signups and said, okay, well, if you had this many kids who signed up for, let's say, Honors English 11, how many sections do you need based off this class being used? We talked about maybe needing to do some sacrifices. And what I mean by that is teachers may not be teaching in their room. If let's say I have a class of 16, Jay has a class of 12, his classroom can hold the 16, my classroom can hold the 12. Maybe that block him and I have to switch. We talked about possibly having to look at the junior high. And if there's spaces over there, and if we do have to hire some additional teachers, maybe we have a classroom over there. Again, it's a sacrifice. It's not the best situation. If we have to hire a science a science teacher, maybe we don't put that person over there. Maybe what they're doing is teaching from a cart and they're going around to the different rooms that might be available. A lot of different sacrifices to make it work to get everybody back in school safely. Make sure, we're looking at a virtual school offering, looking at an online product to deliver that instruction. That way we can take that off the teacher's schedule. With that being said, if I look at the schedule and the contract, I can assign teachers to teach 6 different sections over the 2 days, so 3 a day. So maximizing that, and if I maximize that, then there's going to be holes where I'm currently using teachers to do study halls, or they're doing lunchroom duties, and we may have to hire additional staff for that. And Jason already mentioned this, but either we need to add lunch periods, or we need to identify larger spaces where we can put more desks. Because again, we talk about 3-foot spacing in classrooms, but if kids are unmasked eating, it has to be 6 feet, all facing the same direction. So that presents itself a whole new challenge. And if we have all students back, Jason has all his students back, we may need more spaces to be able to have lunch safely. So with all that being said, we had those conversations. We had another follow-up leadership team meeting after the teachers looked at each individual class, looked at their teaching schedules, and said, okay, what's the wish list? Or I shouldn't say wish list. What's the needs list? What is it that we have gaps to cover? So we identified that we need about an English teacher to teach 2 English 9s, a couple CP 11s, and then career prep. Career prep is being taught by a certified English teacher. And if we're trying to lower the class sizes in English, we wanted to really maximize the English teaching capacity of who we currently have that knows our curriculum and already teaches English. We looked at a science teacher and needing 4 to 5 sections for Earth and Space Science, 4 to 6 sections of ecology. And again, those are half credit sections. So 4 is actually 2 classes, if you will, for the year. We talked about a remote learning mentor, and when we look at virtual school, and I'm trying to change the verbiage from being remote learning to virtual high school, because I want it to be totally different. I don't want people to have the same mindset that the virtual high school for Winslow High School is the same thing as remote learning, because it's going to look completely different. One thing that we know is that students are more successful when they are connected to school. So if we can make that connection, even though they're maybe at home, they're going to do a lot better. And you know, the remote learning mentor's job is really outreach, almost having virtual study halls or virtual homerooms where they can still have kids feel connected to Winslow High School. It's somebody who can follow up with them. One thing that we used to have, and then we've kind of played around with it a little bit, is an academic support specialist whose job is working with small groups of students to make sure that they're successful. We have the benefit with our learning centers where students with an IEP get that one-on-one support, somebody checking up with them as a case manager. Well, we need somebody for the regular ed students, somebody who students can go to. Maybe it's for an identified study hall where they can get that help. Maybe it's, I just need to get a little extra help on this math assignment, and they can go to that person to get that support. Again, smaller class sizes, that's going to be a benefit, especially in math. You've heard, I think, every school and Michelle talk about it as well, is having a universal screener where we will know exactly how our kids are doing in math right now. And we're looking at something that teachers can use at any time to get that immediate feedback. And so that person could come in to help a little bit there as well. And I've kind of already mentioned it, but if the teachers are teaching 6, that means they have 2 preps, 1 per day. That's their full schedule. I wouldn't be able to use them anymore for a study hall or for a lunch monitor. So we may have to be creative and hire people to cover that. And I think that's it. So any questions?
Sounds good. Wow.
It's easy going last. Thank you. And Earl, I do want to chat with you more about your experience with courseware.
Yep.
All right, Jay.
Just a really creative thought. There is the Maine Retired Educators Association, which is an association of retired educators. I don't know whether or not, under the circumstances that the state and the nation finds itself in, whether or not that group would support its members being allowed by the Maine Department of Education to be hired and earn money that they now can't earn. There's a limit to how much they were able to earn and still get their retirement. If there could be some sort of a negotiation that a retired educator could be hired at somewhat less than the where they would fit on the scale, if you took their entire career, they come back, the state would allow them to earn a higher amount than they're allowed now, which is very small. And they could come back. There are a lot of retired educators that would like to get another year in the Maine retirement system that might be willing to consider coming in, negotiating not up the salary scale, but down if it was legal. It's maybe a Drummond and Woodson and Maine Department of Ed question, but there is a group out there that might be tapped if you could do it creatively.
It's a bigger question than Maine. All over the country.
But it's a good point. I mean, if
Yeah,
you can get around the main PERS requirements and so forth, so
That's the
sticking point. But that's, I'm sure, a bit of a hurdle.
Under the
legalese
circumstances,
associated
though,
with that.
you may get some creative thinking.
Very.
Well, you've got a couple things. One is that there is an emergency certification, so if their certification has lapsed, right now the state has emergency certification. But also, it's my understanding that the new rules are, while they couldn't contribute to the Maine state retirement system if they were already drawing on it, they've eliminated the caps for people, so they would.
Oh, have they? Okay.
So they would just come back in at their, whatever their level was before they left, if that was something that they would be interested in. So I think it's much less of a hurdle, probably more of a hurdle encouraging them to.
Yeah,
That's okay.
they eliminated the cap and they extended the number of years you can work. You can work as long as you want.
They eliminated the cap for just COVID or for?
They eliminated the cap period several years ago.
Really?
For any retirements, yeah.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's probably due to the fact that it is a really
A
tight
shortage.
market in
Yeah.
terms of teachers and administrators.
Interesting, look at colleges.
So
Look at
while they did that
your seniors.
within last year or two, that they made those changes, I mean, it could be helpful this year with the circumstances we're in. Whenever it was they made the change, but it hasn't been very long. Okay. All right, I guess special ed.
I don't think Jennifer, I can't see the board. Is she online tonight? She has a sick child at home, so she wasn't able to be with us today. Can we see that she's online?
I don't see her.
No.
I can't see one.
Yeah, she's not on here on the list that I sent.
Okay. So essentially,
Read it?
I'm sorry.
Want to read it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Again, these are needs, should the parameters or the restrictions that we were under for COVID rules remain the same. So this may not be what her needs are following updates to the CDC. But she indicated that the special education department would need super subs to allow for the fact that we would have kids spread out across the K-12 campus. So she would like some subs within her department to cover at the different schools. She's indicated one at the elementary school and one for the junior high school setting. She would request 2 additional teachers to be at the old junior high school, a resource room teacher and a life skills teacher. And I think the thinking there was some of the high school life skills students under this plan may be put in the old junior high so that they can be staffing there. And then finally, she talked about also having, wanting her special ed students to be able to avail themselves of a remote learning experience, and decide that so they can hire a district-wide remote instructor for special education. So if nothing were to change as of last week, which we know it will, these were the things she needed at that time.
All of which is subject to change, but this is where we are right now. You have to like timestamp all this stuff to the second, practically. Any other questions there? We're at the questions and discussion slide, I guess. Maybe we
Jump the gun.
we got ahead of that, that's okay. Any other discussions on this? It sounds like a lot of work has been put in, obviously it has been. And we'll see what the final guidelines end up being and how revised it gets, but obviously the groundwork that's being put in is necessary regardless of what the guidelines end up being. It's all final plans, so sounds good. Any last thoughts?
Well, just a question for the board. You know, this is, we put this on the agenda as an informational item, but we really, had we not have heard something last Friday about pool testing and the possibilities of bringing kids back with less than 3 feet, if you agree as a district to do pool testing, that gives us another option now. But if we hadn't had that other option, this would have been our plan, and we would have done all the things that you're saying, move quickly because you want to get everybody. But if and when the administrators reconvene, which is going to be this week, and we talk about pool testing, because we're inviting the nurses to our meeting and say, tell us exactly what this means, what does it entail. Once we know more about that piece, and we again go back and weigh the pros and cons of this plan versus going down another pathway, if we decide that's this plan or some hybrid of this plan, we know that the goal is to get all our kids back. That's the goal. Does this plan sound like something that you would support as a board if this is what it ends up being? I guess that's just one piece for us to know. Are we on the right track?
I don't want it to be this, but if that's what we have to do, then it sounds like a real good plan.
And it gets kids back in school.
Which is the goal.
We've got to get them back into going to school every day.
And to the idea of trying to hire sooner rather than later, obviously there's triage.
Yeah.
Your high school physical science teacher is one of the hardest teachers that you got to hire. That's going to be harder to find than an English teacher that's qualified and capable. Special education teachers are always going to be at a premium, so you got to take, you guys know that. You would do that. You probably need to get some of these started, some of these hired right now, but not all, until you see where the chips fall.
Well, I think going to what we discussed earlier, of course, is regardless of what space they're in, I mean, we know we have additional needs in the recovery of learning, that, so some of these hires can probably fall into that pretty quickly. So.
This might change 5 more times between now and September.
Well, the thing that comes to mind to me is kind of like when this all started, we went from what we were doing and it constantly evolving into a learning system we ended up with, through last spring and then changes over the summer. And now we're in the unwinding phase going back the other way, but it's changing just as quick going that way as it did going in. So, but hopefully we get back to normal quickly, which is obviously the great alternative. But
I think one of the things that what it's going to boil down to, and it may require a special board meeting, because I think in fairness to all of you, I think it's important for you to have a good, strong understanding of what pool testing entails, so that you as a board know, here's an option. All kids can go back in their buildings where they need to be if you agree to pool testing. What is it? What does it mean? What does it entail? What are the implications? I think once we have a better understanding of that, we probably should come back and explain that to all of you, that you can weigh in on it and say, we think it's a great idea to have all kids all back and further into this, or go with this plan. I think we're going to need some input from you on that.
there's really three levels that I see. There's federal, there's state, and local. And you're asking us to decide locally what information is brought to us from the state, right? Not really from federal. Because the federal guidelines only get to the state and really doesn't matter until the state of Maine
decides, right?
Well, it's interesting because we've been operating at a stricter guideline than the CDC.
Right.
And now we're being asked to operate at the guidelines that the CDC nationally is changing to. So in order to make things
But
happen.
that may change between now and the time school starts.
It might change by Wednesday when you have your meeting.
Right. We may hear something else, you're right.
Yeah. So I think to your point of another meeting, if that's necessary, obviously this is a topic that surely requires the utmost attention. So I guess just, let us know when you think we have something that we need to discuss. And who knows, usually we don't have a meeting in July, but that might change too, because who knows what's going to happen.
If we do have such a meeting, would it be your thought to have a representative of the nurses here so that we could ask questions of them?
Absolutely.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Been a wealth of information. It's taken a while, but a lot of good questions and information. So thank you all administrators for all your hard work. It's obviously this has been a tremendous amount of work
Additional
that you've put in, and obviously you got a ways to go based on what the final guidelines are, but good work. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
All right. So we'll be hearing more on that. That's old business. It'll be old business next time too. New business. So first up for new business is the appointment of a District 4 school board member. As we discussed earlier, Jeff is resigning as of the end of this meeting. And we have an interested person, Hillary Lee, who's sitting over here. And so I've already had, after all that, still interested. She hasn't left, so I guess that's a good sign. So she's expressed some interest in it. She's given me a little bit of an idea about herself, and has reviewed the appointment policy and such. She lives in Corbett Lane, so she's in District 4, registered voter, all the things that you need to be for being eligible to be appointed. So I guess I'll let Hillary introduce herself to us, and then we'll go from there.
I've lived in Winslow for 12 years. My husband and I live on Corbett Lane. We have 2 children. My daughter is a sophomore in high school. My son is a freshman in high school. And I'm a nurse practitioner at Northern Light Care Center. There is,
Okay.
I've lived in Maine all my life, so.
Do your job next year in addition to being a board member. Don't think we could do that.
Good try.
Deferred board membership.
I'm looking hard, like you said.
Good job.
So,
Above that.
So anyway, that's a little bit about Hillary. Does anybody have any questions about Hillary? Yeah.
Any member of the public that's qualified and is willing to serve brings a different voice to the board, and every different voice to the board adds something. So I concur. I support Hillary.
I'll pull the chair out now.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that it worked out that a female representative, I think, will help round out our board.
Add some balance.
We still have a District 3 seat, so if anybody else is interested, obviously that's still out there. Throw that out to the public. But yes, to his point, having people that are willing to serve in public office of the school board in this particular case to help direct in the needs of our public schools is appreciated. So appreciate that. So unless you have anything else to add or anybody else has any questions, we could entertain a motion to appoint. As the process would go, we would need to appoint. She would not be able to serve until she gets sworn in by the town clerk. So we could appoint at this meeting, but she wouldn't become official until she gets sworn in. But we could proceed with a vote or a appoint. But I need a motion, I guess. So
Is the appointment is for how long?
So the appointment, the way it works is you get appointed for the duration, duration of the term, until the next public election, technically, although it is possible that any board member that's appointed could continue by appointment if the board chose and nobody else has run and such. That could happen as well. But anybody could run, or she could run to serve out the duration of the term at the next municipal election, which wouldn't make the June one, so it would make November. So Hillary, for example, could put her name on the ballot for the November election and serve the balance of the District 4 term. And I'm not sure exactly what the cycle is because they changed the town charter last election to change the cycles. Typically it's a 3-year term, but I think there's a couple of 2 years in there to get people, so that people elected there's somebody up every 3 years as opposed to what it was, where it was 4 1 year, 3 another, and none on the 3rd year. So that's been changed. So the at-large are on their own year, both at-large positions. So, I don't know exactly. I didn't look that up to see what the duration of the District 4 term was before. That might be up for November regardless because that's the seat Jeff is in, and he was appointed. So that hasn't come up for its regular cycle, so it might actually be this November or next. So moved. So anyway, we have a motion from Earl. Do we have a second? We have a second from Jed. Any other questions or comments? All are in favor of appointing Hillary Reed to the board? District 4, it is. Well, Jeff, do you have a vote?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Do you have a replacement? We'll let you leave.
After all of that, it's really a life sentence. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And hope you, I think we all enjoy doing it. We get a lot out of it, and hopefully you do as well.
What did you just say?
Huh? You enjoy doing it?
For us? School budget.
Nobody will let us out, but no, it's actually.
We all enjoy it, he says.
It's rewarding in its own
Okay,
way.
it's rewarding.
Let's put it that way. Enjoyment makes you start. I don't know. But anyway, most of us have, well, John and I have been here a long time. I think Nate's next in line. And then Earl and Jay and Jeff are somewhere in there, but John and I have been at it a really long time.
Really long time.
So, all right, well, thank you very much. So I assume Peter will, you'll send that information over to Lisa Gilliam, and
when she's told
and you'll have to go in and see Lisa and sign, get sworn in and such, and you'll sign a little something. So very good, thank you. All right. Woo-hoo. Now we still have District 3. Anybody's listening? District 3, just as a reminder, is better part of Halifax Street over toward Clinton Avenue, includes those streets in between Halifax and Clinton Avenue, toward, not quite all the way out of Clinton Avenue, but in the vicinity of beyond the intersection of Clinton Avenue and Halifax, just a little further beyond there. So District 3 is still available. We had that member resign at the end of the year, so we're getting a few months in and no takers, so please volunteer. Okay, so we'll move on. School budget validation referendum.
Thank you. Question for everybody else.
I don't think they probably don't.
If they don't have one in their packet. So what's coming around, if you don't have one in your packet, is the Winslow projected revenue worksheet that you've all seen several times. And these are the numbers, obviously, that the community will be voting on June 8th. And one of the processes that needs to happen is they need to post at the voting booth, which will be right here in the town office, is where they're going to vote. They have to post some information about your budget. So I need signatures of the board members on this sheet of paper. These numbers reflect the numbers that are on that revenue sheet. I just wanted you to see it so you can compare it. So I'll pass this around for your signature. And there's one here, Joel, that is for you. Actually, this is for me to sign, which will be administrated to the school board, which I believe would be me on this one. So I'll sign this one. And then everyone needs to sign at the top as well.
Okay.
Hillary. No, not yet. Right.
Merry Christmas. I know that this is all new board members get this.
What? What? I didn't say anything.
You give it to me Thursday.
I was just gonna ask the same question.
I was thinking I was going to contact Jeff and see if I can talk.
This doesn't have the date on it. If you want to question it.
That would be great.
I'll text you.
Or there's two, so you can take all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will contact him and try to arrange that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Motor brake. Some school board dates.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Pardon me.
So you want to hang on to that?
Yeah, I'm going to text him right now. Okay, all right, so that's all we have on that. Again, we discussed earlier, Erica's good words on behalf of the school budget to help get information out on that in reference to where it stands on the town budget. So again, thank you, Erica, on that. And it is June 8th is the referendum.
It might be wise just to make a point about something, because you've heard a lot in the newspapers and in the news about increasing funding for supportive education to 55%. A lot of people have heard that. That's come out recently. It's a little confusing because although it's a wonderful thing and it would be helpful to us tremendously if education is funded at the 55% level, this is a biennium budget. And so the supplemental budget is what they're talking about, which is the second year. And so what they're talking about is not this year, but the FY23. So if there's an increase in funds, that's what that's going to be. Okay. Then, and I don't even want to really talk about this, so I'm just going to muddy the waters. But there was a bulletin that came out today quickly at the end of the day in terms of some other legislation that Governor Mills has proposed recently, which could impact this year's funding in a positive way if it's approved. We don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know really, what all the details are to that. And it's not something I think we should hang our hats on right now because it's something that is just out there. But I just wanted to make that comment in case you hear it, because it's going to be confusing to people when they hear it. So the 55% is a year from now, if that works. But then the other proposal that came out late today potentially could impact this year's budget. More to come on that.
Good question. The 55%, if my memory serves, became a law. We use the word law. How many years ago?
15.
And how many years have we got 55%?
None.
None.
So another point.
That's a law.
Yeah, but it's whatever the legislature decides to fund. And one thing that somebody asked me a question on this a couple of days ago. So having the benefit of having heard about this for many years, I would also caution, I guess, what is 55% of what? Because it's been often done where the denominator of the equation changes because the state decides what is 55% of what.
Right.
So they have sometimes claimed that they've increased funding to education as a percentage, but they would take something and move something like teacher retirement, which they used to cover 100%, move it, some of that locally, give you some more money for it, saying they're covering more percentage, but we're actually paying more locally. So just cautions, we'll see what happens when the fine print gets done, but then they're done that, so. Okay. Very good. That one is done. So school board dates. So there's a proposed list in front of us. It stays pretty much in line with what we've been doing. So unless anybody has a
I will
input,
say, new people take note that there's no meeting in July. No official meeting in July.
Point of information in relation to the July lack of meeting. Do you have authority to do the hiring? Is that, different districts, some districts allow the superintendents to do hiring over the summer and they're validated by the board, but they can actually hire independently and some districts don't. And that whether or not you need a summer meeting hinges on that.
That's coming up later on the agenda.
Is it? Thank you.
Yep.
How did I miss that one on the agenda?
Motion to accept these dates as presented.
Oh, okay, I see it.
Do we have a second?
Second. Who made the motion? I'm sorry. Carol. Jay, however, I thank you for bringing that to our attention because that was forgotten one year and it was a very difficult summer.
And this is not the year for that.
No, it's not.
All right. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the school board dates as presented?
I'm a yes. Yep,
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Thank you very much. All right, next up, we'll see if we can keep moving quickly because we're running long here. Schedule C position, math team leader.
So the first thing I want to bring to your attention is a typo. That should say Schedule B, not Schedule C. And Schedule C, of course, has to deal with students, anything students do, whether it's athletics or extracurricular. Schedule B has to deal with teachers. And so this is a Schedule B position. We have these positions in place already, obviously. The individual that we're talking about is our new math specialist, which is very similar to the literacy specialist, who is part of that FLT team. Erica and Kyle, is that correct? They get a stipend for being part of that team because they go to the extra meetings, do that extra work.
Yes.
And so we felt it was important to treat this individual in the same way because this individual is being required to go to all those meetings and do the extra work. So we felt that they should receive that stipend as well. That's the first part of this. The other part of this is that because of some of the funds that we will have left over because we haven't spent anything, we think it would be fair to award this individual that stipend this year because he has done the work. You agree to that?
So moved. Second.
Motion from Jay, second from John. Any other discussion? All in favor?
I'm a yes.
All right, thank you. Unanimous. Seamless Summer Nutrition Program.
Don Hersey is here to speak to us about that.
So just to give a quick update, like this year, the schools have been granted to offer the summer program again through next school year. For that, it falls under a different classification. It falls under the National School Lunch Program, which we would normally operate. The only real difference with that is it makes the school systems adhere to the more strict nutritional guidelines. With that said, I maintain those guidelines this year, so we're not going to see any difference from that standpoint. So it's going to be the same thing that you're seeing, same reimbursement. So that's it.
All right. Any questions for John? All right, hearing none. Great, thank you. Naming a playground facility.
In your packet, you had the policy on naming of facilities for your perusal over the weekend. And Kyle Price would like to make a proposal for you. I mean, this came to the curriculum committee for your consideration as well. I had a conversation with Joel about adding this to the agenda, to tonight's agenda, so that Kyle could do a brief presentation on what his thoughts are on this. So Kyle.
So I believe in your packet, you have a copy of something that I sent to Peter that just gives some highlights of Steve Frank, and who was the principal here for many years. And, you know, we've already got that there, but I don't need to highlight all that stuff. Steve, you may not know, passed in October of 2018. He was 66 years old. It was sort of a sudden thing. His family did reach out to us at that particular point in time and asked if there was anything we might be thinking about doing in his behalf. I'm not so sure they had any like grand plan of what it might be. I had some grand plans, but this one that we're proposing to you here tonight, I think is fitting for Steve. Things kind of came together. You know, there's been some silver linings in the stuff that we've had to go through this past year, and so there was some use of some of the COVID money to add and enhance our playground equipment. And so we were able to take advantage of that, and that is pretty much, I'd say it's 95% complete. Probably need to talk about a little cleanup around the edges of some berms and that sort of thing. But anyway, as you see there in this list, I think it was pretty remarkable. In total, 25 and a half years as either a supervising principal or principal at the Winslow Elementary Schools. When he started before the building was built, he was big on that building. He was a big part of that, from what I understand. Obviously, he wasn't here when it was done, but I could tell from the way he talked about the building, the way he treated it, and the decisions that he made while he was there. When I worked under him as the assistant principal, he took a lot of pride in that. Some of you may know more stories than we'll tell tonight, but I think there was some issues with the contractor, like we have not experienced in the last couple of years, but Steve kind of wrestled those down too, and took care of the subs as best he could, because some of the subcontractors, I understand, maybe weren't treated as well as they should have been. But Steve was pretty pragmatic. He got a lot of things done. He was about the kids. He was about doing the right thing. And I didn't realize this until going to the funeral and the service. I think he only missed one PTO meeting in the whole time that he was a principal. But he would drive home to have supper with his family on those PTO nights and then turn around and come back from Manchester. I wasn't even wise enough to be able to do that, and I live a mile away, so, right. So anyway, the idea here is to name that playground the Stephen and Frank Playground. The family doesn't know exactly what it is that we're doing, so maybe the minutes will reflect that we're just naming a facility. I'm not sure how that works. There's a little bit of language there in the policy. I mean, the family knows that we're up to something. They don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if you'll allow me the opportunity to get back into this meeting tonight. It might take me a second. I get out of it so that I could save my battery here, because I'm afraid that it might not. See if I can. Just need to get back to something really quick. Present. And show you, if you haven't seen it, show you briefly what it is that it looks like over there. I took a couple of pictures this afternoon of what it is that we've got. The reason I want to show you this is I wanted to also, he grew up, his father was a lighthouse keeper. So if you read down through the obituary, they give you some information on that. So one of the things we try to do with the money that we have is to pick some sort of a theme. These colors represent his favorite color of blue. We also try to rip some sort of a theme that would maybe somewhat capture the lighthouse piece. You can't buy lighthouse play structures, but I've sort of coined these the watchtowers. So there's a couple of things here that sort of give the impression that you're out looking over the top of things. This is not really related to that, but sort of an aside. This is a jump stick that actually measures up to 10 feet. So, kids getting up to the upper grade levels are always jumping and trying to tap the tops of doorways. You might find fingerprints and that sort of thing in the middle school, right, Jason? They're always going through every doorway trying to see how high they can jump. Well, this is the back side. This is the back side of it right there. But that's the structure with a couple of towers. This is a new swing set that we have that went along with it. It's taped off right now. We've got a little bit of movement in the ground. It's not related to the concrete or anything like that. It's actually more related to the type of soil we have here along the edge of the river. We're hoping that that'll firm up a little bit. If it doesn't, we may have to do a little bit of work around that. But the concrete itself is fine. We've checked that out. These are a new piece for swings. These are some mats that kind of help keep that wood chip from being pushed out. Here's the back side of the watchtowers. You can't see it really well here, but there's a periscope right there to try to get that sense of looking out. There's some fish and ocean theme here. That's a double slide on that side. This other picture here, there's sort of a portal on this side. This is a manipulation of little rollers that you could probably draw into, making the numbers, that sort of thing. Another one in here. A little bit more, maybe driftwood. I'm stretching maybe a little bit, but these are some wood type. That's a balance beam, basically, or a place to balance and some place to hop off from. We've got a seahorse. This is another better picture of some of that stuff. A dolphin. So, maybe we got a little bit of the coast and what's going on off a little bit. This is just a spinner seat. One of the things that we also did when we were thinking about this, obviously we've got the big structure, but at the time we were buying this, we were focused on stuff that maybe was more individualized, so this whole social distancing thing. The spinner seat, if you go over and look at the playground, it sits a little bit off to the side. It's not installed wrong. It's installed properly because if you get on it, you can get a little momentum going. It's almost like pumping on a swing. Keep yourself going. You can keep yourself spinning on the way that's designed. We now have a total of 4 of these diggers. Those are pretty popular. It's not unusual to look out and see adults running around on those on the weekend. So
Sorry about that.
so that's just a little quick overview of what that equipment is. Our other idea is to add something else around the entrance of that, that will somehow, give the name. And one idea that we're talking about is finding some sort of a structure that might be one of these you take a book, leave a book kind of things. If we can find something that would be waterproof, there's places and parks and areas where you can turn a book in and take a book out. And we've got an idea that maybe that could have a little bit of a construction to it that might replicate a lighthouse. So that's the plan.
Where is this located in conjunction with what was already there, or did something come out? Or?
No, I'm sorry. I probably could have shut my computer down. One of those pictures, you could see the backside of school. So we're just a little bit further down beyond we have 2 playgrounds there. We have one we call the small, one we call the big. So that dolphin and the seahorse and that spinner is along the edge of the kindergarten wing on the small playground. So we added some components there with two additional diggers. There's a total of 3 there. Behind the other big playground headed down towards the softball field is where this other stuff has been put in. And the log and balance beam there is between the 2 swing sets that already existed out there. Swings are pretty popular. We could probably add a couple more like that out there and still, have them used. This is made by Landscape Structures. They're the same company that the original equipment was made by, and that stuff's been there for 28 years. It's really held up pretty well. We're expecting an order this week, just as an aside, about another $7,000 worth of equipment that will replace some worn out stuff. We have a bridge that needs to be replaced. We've got a log roller that needs to be replaced and some other smaller items. So that's a piece of it.
So Kyle brought this forward as an opportunity in recognition of the work that Steve Frank has done for Winslow and his dedication to Winslow schools. I know that you've given this a lot of thought for quite a while, and this is, I think, something that I know I support. I don't remember.
Yeah, I know Mr. Frank and
Mr. Frank, those of us have been around for a while. I think one of the things Kyle spoke to, I don't think you've mentioned it right here, that, playground's a bit appropriate for Steve Frank, given that he's a bit of a jokester and that sort of thing. But,
always. The quick story I'll tell you was the very first day I was on the job with students in the building. I had been a middle school principal for 5 years, came back to the assistant principal here. I'm in the lunchroom, apologize for me, had to hear the story. I'm in the lunchroom, I hear a playground ball go bouncing off the side of the wall in the lunchroom. I'm thinking, okay, I got this. I got middle school radar. I know right where this is coming from. I turn and look, and it was Steve. That was, and it wasn't like he was a poor role model. It was just, we were there to be serious and do our work, but we also were supposed to be having fun while we were doing it. So, as I noted in the paper there, the last time I knew Bob Stevens at York High School was the only other, in terms of Maine Principal Association records, that had been in the same school for a longer period of time. You don't find that kind of stuff. You've had 3 principals at that building over there in the last 28 years.
Well, and to touch on the fact that he was elementary school principal before that elementary school was there when we had Halifax Street, Boston Ave, Grand. What was the other one? You said 4.
I think there were 4 total, right?
Am I missing one?
Only 3 I know.
Okay, maybe it was just the 3.
Right.
Well, for a time, you had people over at St. John's.
Oh, that's true. We were renting space over there
that's
before we built our building, so yes. So he had quite a task there, but he served Winslow well for many years. So I think having a way to honor his contributions to our school system is great, and since you like to have fun, obviously the playground's a great place for that.
Spot.
So, yeah.
I move to approve this playground naming. Second.
Okay. Any other discussion?
What was the policy committee? Was it a unanimous recommendation of the policy committee, or was it just majority?
Well, I'm gonna let Peter answer that question. We've talked about this a number of times, but
This is the old policy.
As far as this particular stuff that you're talking about here.
Those who were there, Jay, there were a lot of people absent that day. Those who were there approved of it. And they wanted to move it forward to the board for your presentation, for your.
Unanimous for those present is unanimous as far as I'm concerned.
And I wasn't present, and I wasn't present at that meeting, for a work commitment, but, I'm in favor as well, so we can add to that equation.
The hope would be is that at some point in time, we'll obviously have some sort of a ceremony that will allow that to happen. But there's a few more steps to go. It's got to go now from here to the town council. I think according to your policy and possibly back here.
Yes.
For the second read.
Right.
But the council gets to weigh in and make sure they approve, which, this sort of thing doesn't happen often, doesn't happen lightly. But I think, some recognition of Steve Frank is appropriate for all his many, many, many years.
So the timeline for that could potentially be in the fall, as we return with everybody. Would be
Seems
kind of-
appropriate.
I haven't said it out loud, but that's kind of what I have in my mind.
Just heard you.
What's that?
I didn't hear it. Okay. Any other questions or discussions? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of the proposal as presented?
I'm a yes.
And we are unanimous. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Good job, Kyle.
All right, very good.
You go, Jay.
That was 11 years
I
ago.
did read the
retired.
agenda, but I somehow missed this when I read it.
11 years ago he retired. All right, lost my agenda now. Next up on the agenda is permission to issue contracts from June 22nd, 2021 to August 15th of 2021. So that goes in between our June and August meetings.
So moved.
And I think everybody's familiar with that. That gives Peter the authority to issue contracts to new hires in our absence for the summer. Okay? Any discussion? All in favor?
I'm a yes.
And we are unanimous. Thank you. Hopefully we have good candidates and lots of hiring. All right, next up is reaffirmation of policy AC, non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and affirmative action.
So this particular policy is part of a suite of policies that falls under AC. And we will have to revisit this suite probably in the fall, early next year, because now Title IX is a part of this as well, and we haven't really addressed that yet, because there's a lot of language in there that needs to be addressed. One of the concerns that came out of some of our policy work earlier with some of these was that what was in place that addressed some of these pieces was stronger language than the language that was being proposed under a different administration. And so some folks didn't want to pull away from this language, not knowing what was going to happen if the administration changed. We think what's going to happen is the language that you currently see, which is what we currently have, is going to be back similar to the strong language that we have now. Having said that, looking at policy AC for right now, one of the things that we noticed was that there was a few terms missing that we felt needed to be added to this policy. And if you look right at the beginning, it talks about school employees, and school employees, discrimination against harassment of school employees because of race, color, sex, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, sexual orientation, and we added gender identity. If you look right underneath that, it goes into harassment of students. So you have employees and then you have students. And with students, you did not have sexual orientation and you did not have gender identity. So we felt as though the two needed to be consistent in that language. And that's the only change to this one, just to make that stronger.
unless something has changed, there's also a federal prohibition of discrimination on the basis of genetic information, the GINA Act, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. I wonder if that's something that you have come across, or if the policy committee has seen that, or if perhaps we have it someplace else in the policy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what you're referring to is we had gone over, and I can't remember the nomenclature of these particular policies, but it addressed that issue that you're referring to. And I'll see if I can find that for you, Jane, and send it to you, see if that's what you're.
Okay, thank you.
And if not, at the June meeting, we can bring that back up, you know.
And going to the Title IX thing, there had been a lot of work done on the title, due to the Title IX changes, but obviously that, the change administrations, a lot of that was going to change anyway. But it was pretty massive amount of work associated with that is in flux right now. So this seems to be appropriate given where we are currently, but we'll be covering it again in the following years.
So this.
But in the meantime, this is reaffirmation.
Yes, because of the slight changes, this is a request for reaffirmation on this one.
So do we have a motion?
Motion. So moved.
We have a motion to approve this policy as presented. We have a second from Jay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the reaffirmation of policy AC as presented? It is.
Yes.
It is unanimous. Very good, thank you. All right, next up is a first reading of policy AC2, racial equity and inclusion.
And this is an AC2, again, to make AC, that whole AC suite stronger. This language is a combination of language from Maine School Management and Drummond and Woodsum. And it really has been pared down to really get at the heart of what this policy is about. And really, it's you're stating that Winslow Public School rejects all forms of racism destructive to our mission, vision, values, and goals. We strive to be anti-racist in all aspects of school life, including but not limited to instruction, curriculum, opportunities, professional development, hiring, and discipline. Winslow Public Schools is committed to establishing and maintaining a racially equitable community to the benefit of all students, faculty, staff, and the Winslow community. It's a brief statement, but it's a very powerful statement, and we really need to have something like this as we start looking at different aspects of whether it be our curriculum or whether it be our various policies that we have or a mission statement. We really need to have something like this to anchor and say this is what we believe in. So it's pretty straightforward.
I think it's a very well written, clear and concise piece that gets to the heart of the matter. Is there a motion to approve the first reading of
so moved
policy AC2? We have a motion from Earl. We have a second from Nate. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the first read of policy AC2?
Yes.
Here, yes. John
voted.
Okay, so it's unanimous? I didn't see your name, so, okay. Very good, thank you. Pretty concise. All right, we'll move on to first reading of policy JLCB, immunization of students.
So if you've had a chance to read this, this fall, we're going to be in a situation where certain students who haven't received certain immunizations are not going to be allowed to attend school. And we currently don't have a policy in place that addresses that. And let me tell you why. when we dissolved from an AOS, the nurses had done all this work. But unfortunately, when policies were taken from a file and dropped online, some policies were incorrectly gleaned and some were unfortunately deleted by mistake. And so this was one of the ones that had been done too. However, we've had the nurses look at this, look at the correct language that the law says, and what you have in front of you is the version that would reflect what is going to happen. You also have an attachment, I believe, in your packet of the vaccinations that are required by grade.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I can't say, don't
I
have
don't see
that. But if you see in the first paragraph, it says requirements, see attached document. That document will be attached to this, and you will have a listing of all of the required documents.
Is that the document that was pushed out in the mail approximately a week ago? All I know is that Evan received a letter about vaccinations.
Yes, I believe it was refined for this policy, but I believe it's the same, relatively the same thing, except what you wouldn't have had probably, well, you may have had some of this explanation here in terms of those students who have not been vaccinated for philosophical or religious exemptions or, which are no longer allowed under this new rule unless they've had an IEP by certain date, and then they have a doctor's note that says, yes, they've had a consult with the doctor, and the doctor has explained to them the dangers of not being vaccinated. So that's what this policy covers, all of the laws that are part of the new regulations.
This is all changed since September 1st of 2021. I mean, when did this change is what I'm asking.
Yeah, this is going into effect this year. Up until last year, they could still say they don't.
Right.
That they don't want to be vaccinated based on a philosophical reason. Or
If I'm not mistaken, I think Governor Mills signed this legislation, so from a timing standpoint, it's been 2 years, I think. It's within this short, not a very, whatever, it's been a couple of years, so. Yeah. They used to have more exemptions, and again, just to clarify for anybody who's tuning in, I mean, the requirements are determined by the state, they're not determined locally. We are just adhering to what is required by law. So
obviously it's not
we're
done by
required to
the
do.
lawyer.
I'm sorry.
Obviously, if it's,
Yes.
the lawyers look this over if it's been done by the state.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, as a public school, we need to comply with Maine law. So, do we have a motion to approve the first reading of policy JLCB as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion from Earl. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Nate. Any other questions, discussions, or otherwise?
I think it's a weakness of this law, and I don't sit in the legislature, and I don't advise the legislature, but students with 504 plans that don't have an IEP have physical disabilities that don't impact their ability to benefit from their education. And it's a little concerning to me as a citizen that it's not possible for a student with a physical disability that doesn't impact their education and therefore has a 504 plan to be able to have a doctor say that it's not in that child's best interest to be immunized. I support requiring immunization and will support this policy because that's what the state's provided. But there are a group of students that have physical disabilities that this does not allow them the exemption that a student with a learning disability can get under this policy. So it's not the policy I would have written, but I understand that it's what's before us and I will support it.
I guess I would say is hopefully when the stricter provisions of this go into effect in the fall, that the weaknesses in the state law will get exposed and, you know, they revise it accordingly. So we can hope. Okay, so if there's nothing else, all in favor of approving policy JLCB first read? Okay,
Yes.
and we're unanimous. Thank you. All right, that's it on new business. Vote of appointments.
Before we vote on the appointments, permission to do a few things.
Go right ahead.
The first one is to remove Jennifer Gagne from that list.
Okay.
The next one is to add Lori Tyler to that list. She will be the PE teacher at Winslow Elementary School. The next piece that I would like to have you consider in the event that you're gonna vote on some type of block is on the second page. And on the P3 to continuing, I ask that you remove Nicole Tibbetts as a site coordinator. The reason that I request that is because with Jennifer not being the special ed director, I need to have a conversation with Jennifer and Nicole to see what is available for those individuals. And it's not fair to either one of them for us to vote on Nicole's position tonight if I haven't had a conversation with her to say, is this what you really would like to do? If there's something else that might be available in special ed that she might prefer. So we still have the June meeting to nominate her if that's what she wants to do. But I think in fairness, I think I need to have a conversation because everything has moved so quickly this weekend.
Move to take them as a group.
Second.
Second. Okay. Is there anybody that has an issue with taking them in the group? I hope it's unanimous. Okay, just like to always have that. All right, hearing nothing else, all in favor of taking the board of appointments as a group?
Yes.
That is unanimous, all right. So I guess I'm now looking for a motion on the group of appointments.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve the group of appointments. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Mr. Fellowship man.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion, anything else? Okay, all in favor of the block of appointments?
Yes.
And it is unanimous. Thank you. All right, next up, resignations. We have one from Mike Thurston as the high school social studies department chair, but he is still staying on as a teacher, so that hasn't changed. Been with us a long time, but apparently he doesn't want to oversee that, so I assume we'll find an appropriate person for that. Thank you, Mike, for your efforts on that for many years. Next up is our next meeting. So I guess since I will mention before we go to that, obviously per Earl's suggestion, we moved the public comments. We said we'd readdress those at the end of the meeting. So if there's any public comments where people want to call in, you can start dialing now while we're wrapping up our agenda. And if we don't hear anything shortly, we will move through and adjourn appropriately. So our next meeting, our next regular meeting, we might end up with a special in there somewhere, is June 21st at 6 o'clock right here. We will continue with the virtual option also for those who prefer that for the time being anyway. And that will be after graduation, matter of fact. When's the last day of school? Tuesday? June 11th. June 14th. All right.
Sooner than that for senior.
June 10th. The water.
4th for seniors. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, The phone is not ringing. So, given that, unless anybody has anything else, we can entertain a motion for adjournment. Nobody wants to
So
adjourn?
moved.
Seriously, I'll move that.
We have a motion?
Yeah,
All right, we have a motion from Jay, we have a second from Nate. All right, there's nothing else. Before we adjourn, thank you again, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good luck with the move.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All in favor of adjournment?
Yes, thanks.
All right. Thank you,
See you, Jeff.
everyone.